Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. This is David Parra. We have a good show today. The subject is veterans from military to civilian life. I believe this is a very timely and a very important subject. Those of us in the community that probably have not served, we sometimes need this kind of education to understand what veterans go through when they go out and then come back to civilian life, what the process is like, the challenges, and also we have some problems, issues related to homelessness, suicide, and all that bad stuff that sometimes our veterans go through. There's a lot of resources, and we have a good group here that are going to help us with this conversation, and at the same time to provide information for veterans and family members to know where to go for help, etc. Before we move on, I want to say that this past week, the LULAC held their national convention, 89th national convention. That's amazing, 89 years that they have been serving the Latino community. And just for those of you who do not know, Joe Biden, President Joe Biden was here and he spoke at last night's awards dinner. If you go to lulac.org, or if you look up LULAC on Facebook, I'm pretty sure they Facebook Live that speech. And I believe it was an excellent speech. I mean, amazing speech, and that we encourage the community to listen to. Again, Joe Biden was here last night at the LULAC convention, and if you would like to, watch and hear what he said, he had an amazing message to deliver yesterday. Let's come back to our subject today. It's veterans from military to civilian life. Let me introduce the panel today, or our guest, Ben Carrillo. He is the current commander of American Legion, Arizona Department, District 12. I got it from last time, Ben.
Yes, I'm now past.
Oh, past. I should add then past, not the current, right? And are you still the PR representative of Arizona or American Legion, Arizona Department branch?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Welcome, Ben, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Hernandez, National Historian of both the American Legion Arizona Department and the American Legion Post 41. You know the history, huh?
Yes.
You have documented it somewhere?
I do.
Okay.
I have bits and pieces.
Yeah, you want to kind of move the mic, so it captures your voice. So, so again, you are the National Historian of both the American Legion Arizona Department and American Legion Post 41. You also are a past commander of Post 41.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you for your service, Robert, and welcome to our show.
Thank you for inviting.
Yes. And let's go now to Jesse G. Fernandez. You added the G. And you are the current commander, current commander of Tony F. Sosa and Ray Martinez, American Legion Post 41. First of all, thank you for your service, and also welcome to our show. We also have Mario Aguirre. He's the operations manager and lead trainer for the Arizona Coalition for Military Families. Mario, thank you so much thank you for your service, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. There's a lot out here in Arizona, a lot of support for our veterans that people don't know about, so we're excited to share that with some of the folks that, like you said, have never served or don't understand what that's like. So we're all excited to be here, I think, right?
Since we have you already, can you tell us just a little bit, what is the Arizona Coalition for Military Families?
The Arizona Coalition for Military Families, or ACMF for short, we'll just say that later because we only have an hour, right?
Yeah.
So we're a private-public organization, and we are essentially here to serve our veterans, service members, veterans, and their families, and the community, coming together either through training. We have a network, a website that connects those folks to the resources that are out there. So it's not to recreate the wheel. When the coalition was established over 10 years ago, they didn't want to create something new, right? They did the research, they did their homework, and they found out these are the needs of our community. And instead of recreating some of those things, they led people to those resources that already exist. Because, I know you said you're a Vietnam era veteran, right? Those things did not exist back then. And now, because of folks from during the Vietnam era and past veterans, they have helped and come up with a structure to help the veterans because they said this will never happen again to our service members. And so we have a ton of resources now. The problem is, how do we find them?
Okay, what shouldn't happen again?
The being left behind, not getting the right resources,
okay.
Assistance, being able, and just the treatment of our veterans, and we always say, it was the military, the government, and the community. Everybody kind of let our veterans down. Nobody really came together.
Right.
And so our veterans said, well, then we're going to do it. Right.
So would you say that veterans are getting better support, but there's still more room for improvement? Would you say?
There's always room for improvement, I believe. But one of the biggest issues is that there's tons of support. They just don't know where to go get it.
Got it.
Because now there's an abundance of information. And where do you go? And also finding the right one that fits you. Because there's stuff that may be only for post 9/11 veterans or only for Vietnam veterans. So if you send someone that the program doesn't fit for them, what's going to happen to that veteran is they're going to say, well, just like always, they're not here to help me, so they quit.
Right.
They stop looking. So instead of sending them to the wrong resource, let's connect them to the right resource because they exist out there. Let's find them, help with employment. A lot of those issues, family issues, the behavioral health, some of those things can often lead to, we talked about suicide and homelessness. Well, sometimes helping them with those issues before it gets out of hand is what, might prevent suicide ideations.
Now, the coalition you said started 10 years ago?
Roughly just over.
Now, do you run the Be Connected program?
We pretty much run with a lot of other partners, of course. The Department of Veteran Services, the VA is involved in that, Crisis Response Network. So there's the whole point of the coalition is that we wanted to partner up with all those folks that are already doing those great things. We ourselves are a small organization, but we help put those things together. So the Be Connected program is a suicide prevention program that's not supposed to look like suicide prevention, right? So assisting those folks with those needs before they get to that point.
Got it.
Sometimes being unemployed for a long time, can be that factor. Because coming from the military, we all know we have a lot of pride. And so some of those things, that takes away from the things that we learned in the military. Yeah.
And we're going to discuss in greater detail the Be Connected program and any other program that you are aware that you would like to put out there so that folks know about. Why don't we come back, perhaps coming from Robert in this way, just let us know the extent of your service, where you serve, etc. Just if you can take a couple minutes to relate that to us.
Sure. I'm also a Vietnam-era veteran. I also spent 4 years in the Air Force active. And then I went and joined the Air Guard for 30 years. So I got to get the label of Desert Storm veteran as well. I was in Saudi. I was in Jeddah, signed there. And as I mentioned before, I had my brother there at the same time, and he was in Riyadh. I was by the Red Sea side. I was fortunate when I came out of the military. I had probably 3 months before I got a job. And I got a job with Lockheed Aircraft Service. I was a jet engine technician in the Air Force. So I got in there, and it only opened the door. I didn't get a job as a jet engine technician. I got a job as an aircraft mechanic overall. Right. So I owe a lot to the military as far as that goes. It structured me, as we've talked before, and I was able to succeed on the outside, going through the Lockheed Aircraft Service, and then being an aircraft mechanic, there's inspections all the time. There's pre-flight, there's post-flight, there's a lot of inspections. So that came out to be a label. So I ended up getting hired as an inspector for Sperry Flight Systems, and I learned a whole new commodity of jobs. So I was one of the fortunate ones. I ended up working for Defense Contract Administrative Services that oversees all of the buys for every branch of service, plus NASA, NSA, and foreign military sales. My story has been very fortunate, to say the least, because military is the one that structured me, and I stayed within that. I didn't realize it until we were talking earlier. I stayed within that military family, that military-minded family, because Lockheed Aircraft it was at Luke Air Force Base, you know, and Sperry Flight System also had a lot of military guys there, and I've overheard the stats, and I go, how can that be? Every person I see is a veteran. Well, that's what I hang around with. You know, that's my world.
That camaraderie that you miss, and if you're not around that, if you're not in a job where that you see that, you're on the other end of it, where you're like, where are the veterans? You know, and so I'm kind of in your shoes, where the same thing happened to me. I'm working in that area, in that field, where I'm surrounded by veterans, but I know it, and so for me, it's one of those things where I'm like, how can it be that difficult?
So talking about transition, that could be one big point where you're used to that camaraderie with your unit, and then you go out into the civilian life, and that might not be there.
And that's why the veteran service organizations help out a lot. That's where everybody comes in, and the title of Marine or the title of Air Force or Navy, whatever, it goes away and it becomes veterans.
Got it.
You know, and we have that structure in the military as well with the American Legion, so it's the same thing.
Ben, the extent of your service, where you serve, etc.
I served 22 years in the Marine Corps. When I retired, my first job was here in Phoenix, Arizona, in Maricopa County. There was only really 2 veterans in my division that I worked at. So they understood where I came from, but I was so regimented that I had a hard time adapting to civilian life, as you call it. I stayed with them for a year because that's what the federal government says. You usually have to wait 1 year break. And then I went into the federal government. I went into the Department of Justice as an environmental safety inspector. Back in the 90s, when the Federal Facilities Compliance Act came in, the military had to start appointing people into the environmental structure. Well, I was at first a combat engineer, and then I transferred over into what they call a chemical recovery chief, is what they called it. And that was basically going in and trying to recover the nasties that the enemy used against us. So doing that transition from one occupation to the other in the military kind of really helped me out in civilian life, because everybody wanted me at that time, because environmental was a big issue. Working for Department of Justice, of course, you know, 9/11 came about, and we turned over to Department of Homeland Security. At that time, we transitioned again, no longer doing environmental compliance, but strictly occupational safety and health, and which I'm still currently doing with the federal government. I've been with them now 20 years come this February. So, yes, the military was a big part that helped me transition into these positions. Had it not been for the military to give me these opportunities, I would have never came in. And just like Robert said, and Mario, is that, you know, the camaraderie of other veterans being in the organization, and you don't know it until you get involved. All of a sudden you start walking around and they say, hey, were you in the military? Yes, I was. And then come to find out that you may have served with those individuals. And I just, in one instance here in Phoenix, when I was working at the Department of Justice, the very 2 people that I worked closely with in the military happened to be in the same division I was. So it was good for me, because it kind of helped me to where when I worked for Maricopa County, I was kind of out there by myself. And even though there was veterans out there, we really didn't interact together, and so it made it a little bit rougher on me to try and figure out my new life, as you would say. But now that I'm with the federal government and with all these veterans that have served either a 20-year span or even 4-year span, we kind of all understand each other, and it's really helped me out quite a bit. Like I told you earlier, I still have a hard time sometimes adjusting, because I always want to be in charge. I kind of have to figure out that I'm not in charge anymore, and there's other people in charge. So. Yeah, my wife doesn't tell me.
We're going to continue with the two of you. We have to go on a short break right now. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. The subject today, veterans from military to civilian life. We will continue. We still have two more veterans to share their story. Commander Fernandez, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us your experience in the military, the extent of your service, where and what branch of military service.
Sure. As you mentioned, I had been in the military. I served 6 years in the Marine Corps from 68 to 74. In 74, I decided, well, I'm going to get out and do something else. Well, I was out for about 10 months. You miss that camaraderie with the people that you've been with. So I was going to go join the Marine Corps Reserve. Well, there was so many people coming back from Vietnam at that time. It was just packed. All the units were packed with people wanting to go into the reserve, the Marine Corps Reserve. Anyway, long story short, my brother was in the Army Reserve, and he says, there's a program out there called the Try One program, to where you commit for only 1 year, and if you like it, you can stay in. If you don't, you only commit for a year. So I tried it, and I liked it. So I was probably in 4 months, and I was put in for Soldier of the Month. And because of the structure that the Marine Corps had taught me, I was far and above the other people, looking, as the word that we use, is strack, looking sharp. So that continued for several months. I was getting Soldier of the Month. And I said, well, that's not fair for the other guys if they're not getting it. It says, well, they don't compete. They're not at that level. Well, anyway, I continued on, and I went through the ranks. Like I said, I started off as an E4, went up to E5 and E6 in the military. There's the different levels of structure. Got up to E6, and I couldn't get E7. And it turns out that I had to move around in order to get the promotion. So I went to a different unit, and I became the transportation movement NCO for a battalion. And there at the battalion, they needed some help. So I went into that. And once I got that, I did that for 3 years. And then they said, well, we need a first sergeant. So again, I had to move because they didn't have first sergeants there. So I moved to a company, and I took over as first sergeant, and I did 2 3-year tours as first sergeant with the transportation company that I was with. And I'll get back into that about transportation because it falls in line to my civilian life. Right. Because I was going to school full time, going to college, but I was also working full time as a truck driver. So it blended right in being in transportation with the transportation unit I was with. So anyway, I started working in transportation, and I finally got a position that I wanted to go for, which was hazmat transportation, which acids, petroleum, stuff like that. So I got into working with a major oil company, and I worked for 25 years.
This is now in civilian life.
In civilian life now.
Okay.
But I was still doing it in my military as a first sergeant with the transportation company.
So in that sense, it helped you the transition was pretty smooth.
Was easy
because
for me.
Employment was very similar.
Correct.
Okay.
So I just brought what I had in the military onto my civilian life.
Right.
Sad to say that I was the only Hispanic in the whole company in the Phoenix area. So it made it difficult for me because having been in the reserves, I had to take time off. Right. Once a month. They didn't like that, so I had to take vacation time, and I was using my vacation time and they said, well, we can't pay you. You have to take vacation time. So that made it very difficult. And then some of the guys there were very critical about me because I would take extra time off. I'm not taking any extra time off. I'm taking my own time off. And it just made it difficult for me. But I still continued. I persevered and I went on. I still continued to go to college. It just got to the point to where it was just too hard for me to. So I got my associates, and that's where it stopped because I just couldn't work full time and raise a family. And
of course.
So that's just my transition. That's like some of these other gentlemen was easier because of the type of work that I did.
Yeah, and we're going to get more in more details about this transition as we move on. Mario, how about your service, the extent, where, etc.?
So I did 11 years total for the military. I was at that point where I was just above the halfway mark for 20. So I figured like either I sign up and stay the full 20 at this point, or get out.
You went to service as a very young man.
I was 20. I was 23 actually when I first joined, which is I would say it's older than most. I was more mature because there's a lot of 17, 18-year-old kids, and those 3 or 4 years makes a big difference because when I got in, and growing up Hispanic with a Hispanic mother, she was my drill sergeant. So I already knew how to fold my clothes and make my bed and all that stuff. I was used to getting yelled at and getting stuff thrown at me, particularly chanclas,
So there's a lot of that in the military.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't even compare to being in a Hispanic house. So for me, that was easier, and I was a little bit older. 23 is young, I get it, but in the military, the other kids, they're worried. I'm like, look, they're not going to kill you. They're giving me free food, a place to stay. I get to go to sleep. I get enough sleep here, and wake up early, do PT. You're like, this is great, right? And so for me, it wasn't that difficult. So I love the military. But in being in I was in the Texas National Guard, got deployed to Iraq as field artillery. Then I came to Arizona, and the field artillery went away. So then I ended up going to public affairs. So I did that for a few years. And at the end, I actually ended up working for the Yellow Ribbon program, which kind of got me transitioning into what I do now, helping veterans and service members. So I had a very weird last few years in the military where I wasn't quite doing the same military services as most people. I was doing something very different. I would actually wear civilian clothes during the drill weekends when we were out at events and training, or getting the new units coming back from overseas and stuff like that. So I also deployed with a public affairs unit. So that's where I learned about writing and journalism and taking pictures. So it all those things helped me to transition. When I got out of the military, the things that I'm doing now are some of the things that I learned in the military. So for me, it was a very crazy journey. So at that 11-year mark, I was like, you know what? I'm happy where I'm at. I've deployed. I've done some very unique jobs in the military. I think it's that time for me to get out and explore what's out there for me on the civilian side, and just kind of and grow from there and see what, and after 2 deployments and having a family and all that. And my wife now, she's in the military and everything. She was in the military too. She served for 22 years. So it was one of those things where we were both in the military, and, we're kind of, ready to grow, So there's a lot of stuff now that we're both involved with and just moving forward. So.
Yeah. And we'll continue to deepen the conversation. So, can we focus the transition in 3 realms: work, the workforce, the family life, and the social life? What type of life do you experience in the military that requires a good amount of adjusting when you transition to civilian life? It could be, some of you have already addressed the work.
The way you talk to people.
Yeah, the way you talk to people.
The way you're allowed to talk to people,
What
right?
are you taught in the military first? Let's describe that experience so that we get a picture of, because like for me, I have not served, right? So it's like, okay, what do they do there that makes it difficult to transition? So help us understand what happens there before we come here.
Well, one of the things that happens in the military, you're very regimented. You have your military structure. I mentioned earlier that I went through the military levels, and they're called, depending whether you're enlisted or officer, you still have to go through the different levels.
So you have a lot of orders given to you?
You always have somebody that's higher than you, regardless of what rank you are.
Yeah, you get yelled at, you said, a lot?
It depends. It's not always about getting yelled at. It's just a certain way you talk to people. I'm not going to get a sergeant major over here tells me something. I don't care how he says it. he doesn't care if he's going to offend me. It's not going to offend me. There's a respect for authority. And so he says, hey, get your whatever out here and get this job done. Those all these explicitives there, right? And I'm not going to, there's no time for me to get offended.
Okay.
Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get it done, right? You do that on the outside world, and there's lawsuits, there's people complaining, there's people that need
that's a huge
safe
point.
space.
That is a huge point.
And you get stuff done, right? And you get straight to the point. There's no, hey guys, I really need you guys to come here and let's work together. It gets the
like
job
me,
done.
like me, right? Would you mind?
Yeah, no. I mean, if you talk to us and say, "Hey, let's get right now," you're the driver, you're the commander. You tell us what to do, and we're going to do it. You say, "Hey, put that mic in your face." We're going to do it, right? You do it enough, repetition in the military, and you learn, right? That's how we learn.
So repetition, authority, following directions.
And that's what I was getting at. It is very regimented in the military to where you come into civilian life, and as Ben said earlier, it's hard for us to really understand how it's going to work. As I mentioned earlier, I was the only Hispanic in the group that I was with, and it made it difficult for me to explain to them, not only being a Hispanic, but being in the military, how things needed to be done.
How about that Mexican orgullo, Robert? I mean, how does that play out in the military when you go?
Well,
the male thing and then the Mexican macho, whatever.
Well, much like you mentioned, we were brought up that way. And you know what? I didn't really realize that until you just mentioned it. My dad, there's no way I could talk to my dad the way the kids talk to their dads nowadays.
Right.
I'd be laid out, but it helped me to transition into, and it's a cultural thing. We all got together, and then that's the other thing you had to get over is you got a Tex-Mex, you got in Arizona, you got New Mexico, Manitos, and then we had to learn how to combine ourselves as well, and we did. Do you find it easier in that sphere of service than we over here in civilian life to kind of get along? Yeah. You have to there. Right. It's a matter of survival.
Yeah.
You got each other's back along with your side. You got somebody there telling you that, the discipline that you have in there is a lot like the home discipline that a lot of us grew up in. I mean, we're old school.
Right.
And one of the problems, my buddies will talk to me and go, "Oh man, my kids, all I get is the handout, and they don't listen to me, and I go, whose fault is that? It's yours." Yeah. It says we try to give them what we thought we were missing, not realizing the reason we are the way we are is because that's how we were brought up.
So that's a lesson right there.
Yep. Yes,
that is a big lesson.
Yes.
How about you, Ben?
Well, my story is a little bit different. My father served 24 years in the Marine Corps. And he was very, very regimented. And that isn't the reason why I joined the Marine Corps. I used to tell him all the time I'm going to join the Navy just to make him mad. But he was a very regimented individual. In our family, everything was done by the book. We'd get up at a certain time. We'd have chores that we had to do. So when I joined the Marine Corps at 17, I pretty much knew the Marine Corps manual because he would give it to me. And drill instructors used to look at me, and they used to ask me all the time, "Hey, do you have someone in the Marine Corps?" And I said, "No, sir, I have no one in the Marine Corps." And this went through the whole 3 months of recruit training. On the last week of recruit training, my dad shows up, and I can see the eyes of those drill instructors just open up because my dad was still active duty.
Right.
And when he left, they looked at me and they said, "I thought you had no one in the Marine Corps." And who was that? I said, "That was my father." So I paid for it the last week I was in recruit training.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. We have to go on our second break. We'll continue with you, Ben. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We are addressing veterans from military to civilian life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Veterans from military to civilian life is the subject today. Ben Carrillo, I had to interrupt you. Continue, please. And also, as you kind of move on to how your own father basically had you in training already, so, perhaps you had a kid, and I asked you off the air if you had kids, and if you can kind of wrap the issue of also how do you do to raise children when you have been raised in this kind of military way?
Just kind of going back, through recruit training, I was so regimented that the drill instructors could never figure me out until the last week, and then of course I paid for it, like I told you. But my life was always structured, and through my whole career, I was a structured person. There was no in betweens. It was either black or gray, and all my troops understood that. When I retired and came out into the civilian community, it was kind of rough because that black and gray, there's blue in the middle. How did that blue get there? In saying that, my son, he's 30 years old, just turned 30 in the last part of June. And I always said to myself, when I have a child, I'm never gonna raise him the way my father raised us. But, in some way I did, because that's just a Latino family type thing. Yes, sir. No, sir. Thank you. Please. All those good things. Never sit in an area where grown-ups are at, go somewhere else. Was I rough on him? He would probably tell you, there's parts, my dad, I can remember one time, it was during the summer. We just bought a home here in Phoenix, and I wanted to put rock in the backyard. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter what time of year it is. I'm going to do work, whatever it is. Woke him up early in the morning and said, come on, we got work to do, and took him out there and start shoveling rock. Well, here he is, 30 years old now, and he's telling his friends, yeah, you got to watch my dad. Yeah, he'll get you up early in the morning and start shoveling rock. So we just bought a new home, and I told him, hey, you know what, son, don't worry about it. It's all desert landscaping, so we don't have to do anything. So, So did I kind of raise him a little bit regimented? Yeah, I did. And you can kind of look at him now that he's 30 years old. He kind of has the same way of doing things.
That
very
tends
organized.
To happen, I think. Yeah. That tends to happen. Yeah, even if they hate you when they're young, eventually they turn out just like your mom, right? Yeah. How about you in your experience raising children? I mean, were you that strict with them?
Well, I didn't have the structure that Ben did, but I come from what we consider a large family, 11. And I was towards the bottom of that 11, so I got the rough end of it all. Because my older brothers were in the military by that time, and they would bring that regimented view. But we had that at home growing up. My father was very strict. He's from Mexico, and he brought that machismo type discipline. Right. You're going to do it my way because I said so.
Te tienes que ser hombre.
Sí. And so, having said that, we were brought up strict.
Right.
Just because I was the youngest, it didn't leave me out on anything. We had to do chores. We lived out in the country, in el rancho, so to speak.
Right.
And we had animals and stuff that needed to be fed, cows that needed to be milked and stuff. So before going to school, we had to go out there and milk the cows and feed the other animals, and take care of business. So we had to get up early before we even get to school to do those chores.
Right.
So it was just a matter of discipline within the family that we had to do it. And not one person did everything. We all had chores that we had to do.
And how about the spouse, the wife? I mean, one thing is the kids, because it's almost expected you have to kind of discipline kids. But how about the spouse? How does that dynamic when you come back, you marry, and now you have a spouse that maybe totally doesn't know anything about military, doesn't care maybe or whatever? How does that dynamic work in the transition to marriage life?
In my case, this is my second marriage. My first marriage, she didn't understand the military life at all. And you have to have a strong spouse, to back you up when you're in the military. You're away from home a lot.
Right.
And they had to take care of the kids on their own.
Wow.
So I see some of you laughing.
I'm laughing because the minute you said, what about your wives? Everybody looked at each other like, oh, crap.
So how about that game last night?
Exactly.
What game?
The transition there with first wife to a second wife is like night and day. My current wife, she understands what I go through, and she spent the majority of the time that I was in the military with me. and she understands it. She goes to the base, does the shopping at the base, to where my first wife didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
So even though we had to have orders at the time, we had to have orders to go into the base, I'd leave her a set of orders. The orders would be sitting there.
Yeah. So I kind of sense that you have had a kind of smooth transition. Mm-hmm. I have to believe that you know people that maybe didn't have a smooth transition. What sort of things did they go through? And maybe, you run the big, or are linked to Be Connected program. What have you seen as struggles for
So one of the biggest
folks?
things, we talked about it here, was that camaraderie, right?
Okay.
We were talking about the percentages earlier. There's less than 10% of our population in the country has served, right? Or are veterans, right? And that's all the way from World War II, Korea, Vietnam to now. And less than 1% are serving currently, So what does that mean when you get out there? There's going to be a good chance that you're not going to run into someone unless you work in a field where there's a lot of veterans. And so that's the one thing, there's no one there that gets that you can talk about your stories, share that information with. We all laugh and we all look at each other when you say certain things. We don't have to say much. Because we know what we're saying or thinking, whereas other folks might not. So that's that kind of, sometimes it puts people in that position where you might feel lonely, that no one understands you, things like that. And then that could lead into other issues.
Connected with folks such as yourself is critical.
It's critical, and not just that, not just the actual help, because there's the VA, Veteran Services, all the different types of mental health, whatever, those actual resources that physically, mentally help people. But then there's those other things, volunteering. You'd be surprised how much volunteering can do for you. I mean, what you guys do, that's volunteering. And you're around like-minded people. That alone can do so much. And that's not something that a counselor can help with. That's not something that a specialist can help with. That's not even related to your job. That's just volunteering. Because guess what? We all volunteered for the largest volunteer military in the world, right? And so now you're doing it again in the community.
Is there a process that the VA or the whatever branch of armed forces you served in, a process of transition, that a program that they offer?
They try.
It's very limited. So I'll give you a great example. I went to a retirement on the 4th of July for a kid that worked for me as a private coming into the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. When he left me, he was a sergeant. And at that time, I retired from the military. Never heard from him for about a year. And his wife, calls me up and asked me if I'd be their best man. So I went there became his best man. This is an individual that hated me, like everything in the Marine Corps. I just went to his retirement by surprise, and I started asking questions. Now, this guy, this grown man now, is a 4-time war veteran. So that means he's served in the combat field 4 different times. His mind is completely different. He's coming up to retirement. When you come up to retirement, they give you a real quick brief, and then they send you out on your way, and you're kind of lost. Wait a minute. What about jobs? And they say, oh, yeah, go on this website. When I retired, I had very limited information. That's why I was probably pretty much lost. It wasn't until older veterans started grabbing me, started asking me questions, and then started helping me. That's how I became a volunteer in like the American Legion, the VFW, and all these other organizations I belong to.
Now, within those units, is there information that helpful information?
It's very limited information because most of the people giving me that information haven't gone through a rough patch. Some of them just went straight from retirement or service in the military and walked in and said, I got a job now teaching individuals transitioning to civilian life, and the only thing I'm going to give them is a website where you can look for jobs, tell them about your benefits with the VA, and that's pretty much it. So think about this. I was an individual that has disabilities based on my service. I didn't know that once I received 30% disability, I was eligible for education to reprocess me into civilian community. But because I had so much education the Marine Corps had already given me, I was already marketable.
Wow.
But these small things are things that our veterans today need to know.
Right.
This individual that retired on 4th of July, when I asked him and a group of individuals that retired and started explaining to them things that I had been doing, they were completely lost. They said, no one told us that.
Yeah. We have about a couple of minutes, Robert, if you wouldn't mind. What is your sense of folks that go through issues in this transition process? What have you seen and learned?
Well, there's two things. I have gotten calls from the wives of buddies of mine that were in the military. One was the Army, Vietnam. The other one was in Desert Storm because they went off the deep end. And they wouldn't listen to anybody but a veteran.
Okay.
And they weren't unaware of what was available to VA and all that because, you know, you're it's like asking them, somebody that's had too much to drink if they want another drink.
Right.
You know, they're going to take the drink. They're not going to take the help.
Right.
So these guys are going through a lot, and they'll only listen to a veteran. And you sit there and you explain to them. When I got out, I don't recall. I know there's a transitioning office or something, but I didn't utilize it. I think it was up to me, and I just said, I'm out of here, and I left.
So you basically had to look for resources.
Correct. On your
own.
On your own,
Yeah.
and talking to your buddies.
Wow.
And that's about it.
So that's like a big void then that needs
Yes.
to be filled. But
Well, I'll say real quick, and we have to
Yeah.
go. But sometimes, like you mentioned, you said it. They're out there, right? So sometimes like I mentioned, the coalition. That's what we help. We help people connect to the resources that are out there. So that's one, not knowing where they are. But two, sometimes it is up to us. And when we're getting ready to leave the military, especially when you come back from combat or being overseas, the last thing you want to do is stick around any longer and talk to some doctor or even though that's the best thing for you at the time. That's not what you think is the best thing. You're thinking, I want to go drink. I want to go celebrate. I want to go be free. And then a year later, 2 years, sometimes 10 years later, the issues arise. Sometimes it's up to us and we just don't take advantage of it. So I think it's a combination of all those things, you know?
Right.
So
we have to go on our last break. We will continue in our last segment to talk about the Be Connected program and anything that you want to offer in terms of what veterans and their families can do, where to call, where to go for help. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. And before we move on to the conversation of this transition process, I got some data from the internet. There are 624,000 World War II veterans. There are about 1.4 million Korean conflict veterans, about 6.6 plus million Vietnam-era veterans, and 31% of the Vietnam-era veterans suffer from PTSD. That's a pretty high number. Gulf War era, 7.2 million plus veterans, and 10% of those or them suffer from PTSD. So again, we were talking about on the last segment that there's really not a very concrete, solid process that is offered at the branch of service that you serve for transitioning. So you pretty much have to be very proactive. And I assume that the veteran serving organizations, right, Robert? Right. Of which the American Legion is one of them. I assume that there's a big role to play regarding this. Anything at the post 41, Robert? Any level? And we really want to come back to Be Connected, because I think Be Connected program is a very good program. So let's make sure we do that.
Yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. There's generally, within every branch of service, some kind of transitioning office or whatever. It's just that we're generally not in a frame of mind to see the value of that when we're ready to get out.
I see.
So it really bestows us that we don't get it. Now, American Legion, now it catches the I want to call them the senior or the veterans that actually came out. Now they're starting to see what value that might have been. They start looking for programs that are available. They start realizing what your benefits are, which is something we should have known a long time ago. But partially our fault. We didn't look.
Is there a concept that perhaps every post should have some kind of an expert or someone who is trained to basically help folks go through this transition at the post level, American Legions?
And we do have it. They're called
VSO, right? Veteran Service.
they're service officers.
Okay.
And those service officers are trained to help the individuals to transition
Right.
from the military life into civilian life. We get them when they join our post.
Right.
In our case, it's post 41. But a good service officer, properly trained, can get a lot of that information out
Right.
to them. But to get a good service officer is the problem because it's very time consuming.
Yes.
So someone from within a post kind of have to become an expert in this, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
But because it's so time consuming,
it's
a
very
lot of people-
demanding.
and it's very demanding.
In
work.
your organization, do you do that type of training? Sorry, Mario.
Yeah, we can help with that, and I know that Scott Fincher over at the Department of Veteran Services for the state, he was the main trainer for that. I know he got promoted recently, but he used to do that training for all the VSOs throughout the state. Either way, the Department of Veteran Services is really the people that give them the training and also can help them, give them the access, right, to get information that most people can't get. So these VSOs, these are folks that not only know what to do or where to send people to, they also have access to certain things that other people don't. That way they can get the actual information that they might need from the veterans, such as, because it's not easy because we need paperwork. You need your D-214, you need your social, you need when you served, where you served. So sometimes that itself, I mean, when I think about it and I'm like, man, I really need to file a claim for this knee or whatever, or the surgery I had, and I'm like, but I got to dig up all that paperwork. I'll do it next time. And next time turns into next year and 10 years from now, because there's just so much there that you're like, is it even worth it, to have to go through the stress of filling this paperwork? Because I know that's not a hard thing to do, but for us veterans, I think we would rather dig a foxhole than go through and do paperwork.
Now, you said that you started your service at 23. Do you think that it's a tougher transition for someone who goes to serve like young, like 18?
I think it just depends on the mindset.
On the person.
Yeah, but you know what? It can be, because if all they know is the military from the day they graduated high school and they went into the service right away and never really had a civilian job or anything like that, and all they know is the military, when they come out, that's all they know. And the world outside is not at all like the civilian world.
Right.
So I think it can be more difficult. But if you actually maybe spend a little bit of time in the civilian world before, a few years, like me, I had been a bartender and I had waited tables and I had just done a bunch of other stuff that I was like, I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to the military. At least I knew what the expectations were on the outside coming back.
What is the Be Connected program?
So Be Connected program, like I said, it's a suicide prevention program without it looking like a suicide prevention program. So there's a phone line for it, and I don't know if you want me to share that.
Yes,
but,
please.
I'll get that up right now. So there's a phone line. There's a matching technology. So that's the resourcecommand.org. If people want to go there, even for you guys, it makes it easier for anybody that wants to help veterans or even veterans themselves. They can go onto that resource network. Once again, it's resourcecommand.org. And you can look up all the resources, and this is for the state of Arizona, right? And that will connect you to you guys. You guys, the American Legions, the VFWs, they're on there. If you have VSOs, we're working on getting those folks on that network so their phone numbers are out there as well. So like I said, this is a way to get people in touch with those services, not to replace the services. If it's employment,
right,
it's going to be on there. If it's
you're going to
mental
connect
health,
them
yes,
to
connect
the source,
them. So that that leads into the Be Connected program, right? The resourcecommand.org is the matching part of it. That's the network. That's finding the resources. The phone line is, and let me get that up here. It is pretty simple so that we don't forget as veterans, right? So it's 1-866-4, the number 4, AZ Vets. So AZ, 1-866-4-AZ Vets. So it makes it
anybody
easier.
who calls there is going to get somebody who's going to listen to them, what their needs are, and they're going to try to connect them to some agency.
Correct. So they work through the Crisis Response Network. So that's a 24. This line itself is only Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But there's always someone there 24/7 from the Crisis Response Network that if you are in a crisis and you call after hours, it will send you to them. and then they will help you with that crisis, right? So there's always someone there. But for everyday purposes, if I need a plumber or I need a moving company, or I need a job, or I'm really stressed out over this, you can call that number and they can match you. They can go onto the network and match you with a resource, right?
Right.
And then the last piece to the Be Connected program, so there's the number, there's the matching technology, the network, and then the last piece is the learn. So that's where I kind of come into the picture a little bit more, is educating the public, a lot of civilians that want to help but don't understand how the veteran world works. And so we teach them veteran culture. I've done reintegration training. We've done like a boot camp style
recruiting
training.
volunteers is always challenging. I mean, AARP does a lot of work with volunteers, and it's very challenging. How successful is your program in recruiting community members to be trained to help and assist veterans?
So in the past 3 years, I would say, or just over 3 years, we have over 3,300 navigators that have come to the training itself.
Wow.
It started off as a 6-hour training, and we used to provide lunch, and that's probably why people came. But now it's kind of become known in the community. And so, we'll average like 20 to 30 people. We've done classes up to 100 people. It just depends on the organization. It depends on the community.
So what is the training about?
The navigator training is teaching folks, military culture, so they understand how to speak to a veteran, right? Understanding the rank structure, understanding that if, I know you're Army now, so you wouldn't be offended, but you were always Marine, right? If I called you a soldier...
I ignored it.
Exactly. And so if you're trying to help as a civilian, if you're trying to help him and he comes in, asks for help, and they say, "Oh yeah, what's up, soldier? How you doing?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" Because he was a Marine, right? Okay. And I know, and people out there are like, well, what does that mean? Well, come to the navigator training.
Right.
So we teach those kind of things. They're very simple things of how to talk to veterans, how to communicate. Because in essence, if you really truly want to help someone, you want to be able to connect with them, right? And the same goes for any culture, right? If you want to help Hispanics, you got to be able to adapt to their culture, understand their culture, right? You don't want to insult anybody's culture. Same thing with the military. So that's one of the pieces we teach them. We teach them where the resources are, talk about the Be Connected program, talk about the resourcecommand.org, the matching technology. So now you've got all these people that are equipped to be able to help veterans. And so the point is that even if it's one person that you help, that's the point. So now we're not relying on one VSO to help thousands, but we're relying on the baristas, the bartenders, the taxi drivers, the Uber drivers, the moms.
Wow.
Anybody that comes to those trainings.
So you just basically become, it's more of an awareness training. It's not that you're going to go and do anything. It's just for your daily life.
Right. And
so that when you meet veterans, you're able to help them understand,
and
interact with them.
Well, from that level, all the way up to, we've trained a lot of folks from the VA. Folks from the VA that are not veterans. Believe it or not, there's a lot of folks there that even though they're working with veterans, they don't understand veteran culture too. So we've done that training for Department of Veteran Services, VA, government agencies.
How long is the training?
No, so now we've been able to knock it down to 3 hours. So
I'm going to have to take the training.
Yeah, it's a fun training. We also offer an immersion training for civilians who really want to learn about military. So we take them through a boot camp. I'll send you all the next one that we're at, so you just come visit and laugh and point at the people.
Could we do a show on what you teach there? How long would it take you to kind of?
The culture piece itself, we could teach that in an hour. So the great part about our training is it's always adaptable and it's in segments, so we can make it shorter or longer for the individuals.
This is great. So you have at the branch of service, wherever that may be, the Army, the Navy, they should have some transition program. Right. Then if they come to the veteran organization or serving organizations, that should be another place where they can get some help to oppose the American Legions. Now you have this other Be Connected. So there seems to be improving, and hopefully it'll keep improving. But I think the community involvement is going to be also important.
Yeah.
Well, there is a renewed awareness now. Veterans are high on the list of every organization almost to try to understand and try to work with because of who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say too real quick is for the network and for the things that we're doing, like you said, it's almost a popular thing right now to want to help veterans. And so we want to make sure that the people and organizations that want to help veterans are doing it for a legitimate reason. So they're vetted. the people that we're working with, they're not just folks that are, hey, in one night, I was like, I want to help veterans because I found out that that's kind of cool, or there's money involved in it. There's a lot of that. People.
I would like to work with you and see if we can offer a training and then have AARP involved, maybe invite members or something. And do you do trainings offsite, or they have to be in your facility?
Both.
Have you ever done one in Post 41?
I was just going to ask.
No, but we could. We do them. We do them all over the state.
Yeah.
We are all over the state.
I think
talk
the
more.
state of Arizona Department of American Legion will be bringing you in.
All right, sounds good.
Ben Carrillo, thank you. Robert Hernandez, Jesse Fernandez, and Mario Aguirre. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being here. I think this was a great conversation. We will continue to serve our veterans as much as we can. We really hope you enjoy the show. Join us next week. Have a great week. This was AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection.